Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be my top 10 most read authors since starting Booktube almost 6 years ago. I have read at this point well over 500 books, and I thought it would be interesting to look at the ones I have read the most from. But what's interesting, it's not always my favorite authors. I'll talk about the reasoning behind it, but some of these authors I'm surprised I have read that many, and there are authors I'm surprised they're not here because I love them, but I guess I don't tend to read like 20 books by the same authors, or some of my favorites just don't have that many books that are out. So let's get into it. In first position, to absolutely no one's surprise, we have Brandy Sandy. Brandon Sanderson, I have read, I believe, 15 of his full-size novel and like a dozen novellas at this point. He's definitely one of my favorite authors. He's very strong in terms of fantasy and sci-fi. This bookshelf, all of his books. I think ever since I started Booktube, I have read at least one book by him every year, and it's going to be the same this year. I just tend to really enjoy them, especially his adult work. I feel like YA is more hit and miss for me, but he's just a consistent author. World building, magic system in general are just fantastic in his endings. So to no one's surprise, Brandon Sanderson. In second position is Stephen King, which surprised me because I finished 9 books. I'm in the middle of two that are a part of my pile of shame. I just never finished them for whatever reason. I was a little surprised because I haven't read anything by him in probably like 2-3 years at this point, but it's not that surprising because he's such a well-renowned author. So whenever I started watching Booktube, I saw his books a lot, and whenever I would go to library sales, which back in the day, book sales, the books were $4 for $1. So his books were always there, obviously, so I ended up hoarding a lot of them, so I eventually read a bunch of them, but he doesn't tend to be a favorite author for me. I actually did a video reviewing most of the ones I have read, and the majority of them were like 3.5 stars because his endings always kind of suck. I think between like 9 that I finished, there's only one that I thought the ending was good. And I don't really care for the way he writes female characters. Like, there's always something really problematic in his book. Like, even the ones that I overall enjoyed, like It or The Stand, there's always something that just brought the whole story down for me. So I don't consider him a favorite author, but I have read 9 books by him. In third position, we have Shannon McGuire, which I was a little surprised, but not really when you think about it. I'll put some on the screen so you can see, because I read 6 books, part of the We Were Children series, and the books are like 100, 200 something pages, so they're pretty short, so it makes sense right there. It's like 6 of them, and even some of the other work was also pretty short. Dawn, Day, Dark, and something. I kind of forgot I had read that one, to be honest. And more recently, I've read Why Do I Not Remember Her Titles, like, at all? Frankly, she's also not a favorite author. After this one, I realized that her stuff just doesn't work for me. I was really, really annoyed with this book, to be honest. It's kind of popular on Booktube, although it's a bit more hit and miss than her other work, but I don't think I'm going to read more by her because the only book I really cared about was An Absent Dream, which is the 4th book in the We Were Children series, which you can read as a standalone, so you could just read that one. But yeah, I realized that she's just not an author for me, and it's okay. She's popular, but just isn't for me. In fourth position, we have V.E. Schwab. I have read 2 actually under Victoria Schwab, which she uses whenever she writes YA in middle grade. Didn't really care for those, but her adult stuff actually works for me. I did enjoy overall the Shades of Magic trilogy, which was super popular whenever I started watching Booktube and doing Booktube. So I read those pretty early on, so that's 3 right there. And I personally really enjoyed The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which was overall a bit more hit and miss, but personally I really, really enjoyed her writing. I think it's her best work in terms of like the quality of the writing, so I do think she's a solid author. I will be reading more by her. Whenever she comes out with the last book in the Villains trilogy, I will be reading that one. And actually, Vengeful, the 2nd book in this trilogy, is probably my favorite book by her because I really love Marcella, her villain. It's in popular opinion to prefer that one over the 1st book, but I've accepted that at this point. But yes, I overall enjoy her. I don't think I would call her a favorite author, but she's a solid one overall for me. Next position, we have Blake Crouch. I have read, as I'm filming this, 7 books by him, but he's coming out with a new one next month, which I will be reading the second I have my hands on it. So it's like 7.5 at this point. He's an overall favorite author / pretty solid one. My issue with him is that his older work, I have read 2 of those, I'll put them on the screen, Good Behavior and Run, which I really, really did not like actively did not like. His most popular work, Recursion, Dark Matter, definitely worth the hype. Pine series can be more hit and miss. I definitely feel like his flaws in his writing is more obvious than his newest work, but I still overall really enjoyed the concept, so I was a little bit more forgiving with it. So I overall really like his stuff. I think it will depend on how Upgrade goes, his newest book, but I would say overall, pretty solid author. But I have one more of his older book, Abandon. I'll try it, and if it sucks, I will never read older books. Although I think it's most of his work at that point. But yeah, don't really recommend older stuff, but highly recommend newer work. I believe we are now at 6th position. We have Becky Chambers, which, yes, absolutely a favorite author. She writes, I call those wholesome sci-fi. They're very comforting. It's just not super action driven, and I'm okay with it. Books are just comforting. Like, they're like a warm mug of tea on a cool night. There's always a lot of drinking tea actually in her books. Might be the reason. But yeah, super wholesome in general. I read the Wayfarer series by her, 4 books. I personally prefer the first 2 books over the rest, but still Becky Chambers. The writing is still great in my opinion. My favorite by her is To Be Thought If Fortunate, which is the only book that isn't wholesome. But I really, really love that one. And then I just recently finished actually the Monk and Robot duology. This is the 2nd book that's coming out in July. I want to give away on Goodreads, that's why I have one. And it's just fantastic. Again, super comforting, super just, it's so chill. And it's just not something I see often with sci-fi, and it just works for me. And have you seen this cover? Gorgeous. So yes, highly recommend her as an author. She's not my most read, but I have read all of her work. So then we have Peter Swanson, which, okay, we get into the category of authors I've read a lot, but I've read 7 of his books, but I've truly only enjoyed, the first book that I read by him, and then I continued reading obsessively everything except one, I think, is one of his early books, The Girl with the Clock for a Heart or something. I will probably read it because I have issues. I'm stubborn, and I liked The Kind Worth Killing so much that I kept reading. Some of them were okay, some of them were just really not good, like that one, All the Beautiful Lies. Sucked. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him, to be honest, at this point. I will continue to read more by him. Like, I don't actively dislike him. It's just that nothing really hit the mark as much as the first book that I read by him. Always sucks when that happens. I think that's why sometimes I'm a little hesitant to like read more by authors I love, because what if I don't like the rest of the stuff? Like him. Then we have Leigh Bardugo. I finished 6 of her books, which also a good number. I read the Grisha trilogy, which I liked the first book. The rest was so-so, not gonna lie. And then I read the Six of Crows duology, which frankly, I think the characters are very likable, but I don't like it as much as everyone else. And then I read Night House by her and actively disliked it. There's a scene in there that I think is completely unnecessary, and then the whole story was kind of boring. I hate the main character, to be honest. And there's a side character that's the only one that is like worth reading the book for, and even then, I'm not continuing the series. So I feel like for me, she's very hyped on Booktube, but I don't consider her an author that I would read that much more by. I have one more. I have the King of Scars by her on my shelf. I'll try that one, and depending on how that goes, it will determine if I read more by her or not. But I'm kind of indifferent by her, to be honest. I just don't love her work. In 9th position, we have Philip Pullman with 5 full-size book and 1 novella. I reread for Booktube as an adult the Is Dark Materials trilogy, which fantastic as an adult. I loved it as a kid, cried at the end of the last book. And as an adult, I realized so much went way above my head. Definitely worth the read. But I decided to read his newest companion kind of series. And the first book was very meh. It felt like a very, very long prologue to me. And I liked the world enough that I was like, fine, I'll continue just because. But the first book was meh. The second one, The Secret Commonwealth, sucked. Very confusing. I really hated some of the stuff that were included. I think what I resented is that in the first trilogy, there's no sexism. And in this book, there's an attempted rape scene that makes no sense with the story, and the way it's handled, the way the character reacts, really badly written. So it just took me by surprise, brought the whole boring story even lower. And out of sheer stubbornness, I will probably read the last book because I need to know. So I think with him, I will remember fondly the series I grew up with, but just forget everything else. So in 10th position, there are a few authors I have read exactly 5 books by, but there is one I'm about to read, a 6th one, so I decided to include that one because it makes the most sense. Like, in a couple of days after this video is posted, I will have read a 6th one. So, Riley Sager, which I am growing more and more, not angry, but I dislike him more and more every book I read by him. The first book that I read by him, The Last Time I Lie, was my favorite by him. And again, ever since I've been trying to like find something else by him that I like, I keep getting sucked into reading his newest work. And the last one I read was Survive the Night. This was the only 1 star I gave last year, and like I actively hate it. I could go on a rant for an hour about it, like literally. The ending was horrifying. The prologue, the epilogue was like literally whoever decided this was okay to be published needs to find a new job. This is harsh, I'm fully aware, but if you have read it, it is bad, like bad. So like I am on the fence. That's why I'm saying that he's coming out, I believe June 22nd. They changed the date recently for The House Across the Lake, which I will be reading. And if I hate it, I will never read anything else by him. And I will be fully on the hate train for his work because I have so many issues, like so many, like he keeps relying not only is he writing under a pen name that is like gender ambiguous, he keeps relying on really dumb or like mentally ill / unstable women for a story to stand, which like if you do it once, fine. If you do it, like 5 times, not so good. So I have a lot of issues, clearly. Like even tried at one point with Home Before Dark to make the whole female character woke and made it so bad. Anyway, I did say no rant, but why am I reading the next one? I don't know at this point. I don't know. Again, sheer stubbornness. I am noticing a pattern here. Maybe I should just focus on authors that I love because like Jane Austen, I read 5 books. If I read one more, she would be the one on this list instead. Or like Octavia E. Butler, I have read 4 and I have pretty much every single other book by her on my shelf because I love her. But yeah, literally all I want from him is for him to write a book with a main male character. I'm just curious to see what would happen. This review sounds so harsh, but like I'm telling you, like I am one book away from just hating him. So yeah. So what did we learn today, Emily? Clearly, just because you read a ton of books from an author does not mean that he's a favorite. From this list though, Brandon Sanderson, highly recommend him. Becky Chambers, if you're looking to get into sci-fi, for example, you're more of like a contemporary reader, would highly recommend her. And if you like really fast-paced kind of book, Blake Crouch is pretty solid, especially if you stay with Recursion and Dark Matter. V. Schwab too, but I would recommend the Villains trilogy. Start with that one. It's probably her most well-loved. So let me know if you would be interested in looking at part 2. I will probably wait a little bit so I have time to finish a couple more books by certain solid authors that, Octavia Butler. But this was definitely illuminating for me to realize that I need to stop binge reading authors that I'm not loving. I think it's the hype. I'm doing it a lot less, I feel like. Most of these books that were from authors I didn't really love were from a couple years ago. I feel like I've started to really focus on books that work for me, genres that work for me, and not listen to the hype as much. I do still get sucked in. I feel like we all do, and it's normal, but I have to focus more on solid authors from now on. This ended up being a little bit more renty than I expected. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out. And I'm looking forward to reading the latest by Riley Sager and Blake Crouch. We'll see how that goes. Kiss on a cheek or loving just like